The 35 1.4 G Master is now official from Sony. While the announcement of a new G Master lens is always exciting news, I think literally nobody is surprised about the lens itself. This is literally exactly how everyone would imagine a 35mm G Master lens is gonna be like. Which means this is good, by the way, in case there's any not Sony fans watching. But to be a bit more specific, this ticks all the boxes to be a member of the elite G Master Society of fine lenses. So exquisite wide open sharpness, creamy bokeh, blazing fast autofocus, low distortion, low chromatic aberration, and a not so low price tag. But there you have it. This has to be the shortest review I've ever done yet on a lens. Or so I wish. I'm not actually done. Now, about how unsurprising this lens looks. Part of the reason is probably the way it looks pretty much identical to the 24mm G Master. This, the 24GM, and the 20-1.8 are three tricky lenses to tell apart in a rush. But the 24GM does get a tulip style hood. The 35 having a longer focal length gets a tube style hood. Also love that the switch to declick the iris ring is still there. I did also mention that it's completely unsurprising for a G Master lens to produce sharp images wide open, but I found the wide open performance on this 35GM to be so incredible that I just have to emphasize it. The resolving power of this lens wide open at f1.4 is unfathomable. It does such a great job that even stopping down to f4, I can't notice any perceivable improvement in resolution, at least not on the 42 megapixel A7R III I tested it with. It does make a bit of a difference in the corners, however. Wide open, it's still excellent, although slightly softer when compared against the center. And when you stop it down, the corners do get a little better. And in addition to the insane resolution, this G Master also has ridiculously low barrel distortion for a 35mm, just wonderfully straight lines all the way to the edges. I'm also quite certain that the existence of this 35GM has generated some amount of curiosity, specifically how this GM compares to the 35mm f1.8, which itself is quite a recent 35mm from Sony as well. The 1.8 already had very impressive wide open resolution, but with a G Master as a contender now, comparing them both at their respective maximum apertures, the 35GM at f1.4 does top the 1.8 in terms of wide open resolution, both in the center and in the corners. It was also a thing on the 1.8 where it had a noticeable amount of chromatic aberration wide open. If we compare that against the 1.4 GM, both wide open, the GM completely owns it in this category. There is barely any visible trace of chromatic aberration on the GM. And of course, the G Master is at f1.4, so 2/3 of a stop brighter than the 1.8, which does give you a significant edge when you need that bit of extra light. And on a wide-ish focal length of 35mm, f1.8 versus 1.4 does make a notable difference in bokeh. But that would also translate to the G Master being a larger and heavier lens, although that's if we compare it to the tiny 1.8. If we take the 35GM for what it is, it's a perfectly acceptable form for a 35mm lens. And even though I would still consider this a small lens, it does appear to be moving quite a fair amount of glass when you are focusing. Couple that with a fast and powerful AF motor, it is sometimes enough for you to feel the lens tug you a little bit when you initiate autofocus. Just something that caught me a little off guard for a lens this size. But the images this is capable of producing is beyond rewarding. 35mm is an incredibly useful focal length, and it's also my personal favorite to shoot with, and I think it's just great that it's now joined by a worthy member of the G Master family, and with quite a strong presence, I would say. This is a crazy good lens in almost every aspect. Easily the perfect 35mm lens for Sony E Mount. It's definitely a lens that you want to keep close by for low light photography, and also for getting those shots with just the right amount of bokeh. And that's all I got on this new G Master lens, so here's some other videos of mine if you are interested.